Welcome to Torchbearers by College Esports News. My name is Kenneth Christina, and on this show, we talk with those carrying the flame of college esports at programs across the continent to get their expertise in a particular segment of our vast ecosystem. In this episode, I discuss the eligibility white paper from Voice with co-author Joshua Reisenberg. Josh, or Coach Thumper, is the head competition manager for the University of Oklahoma's esports program. He shared an interesting perspective on eligibility, how it intertwines with everything else we do, and where he believes we should go next as an ecosystem. Here's my conversation with Josh. Josh, welcome to Torchbearers.
Thank you. I'm welcome. Happy to be here.
Yeah, awesome to have you here. Obviously, today, want to talk a lot more about the eligibility white paper that you helped co-author alongside Russ, Hammer, and Jesse. But first, before we dive into all that, the warm-up question, or there's two warm-up questions we like asking. For one, obviously, you have a day job, right? Your current
Sure.
role. What's the one thing that is top of your mind the next time you have to go in to work?
So I work as I'm a master's student. I'm getting my MBA. I graduate this December. I don't consider really that my job. My job is competitive manager, which effectively acts as the athletic director for the esports program at the University of Oklahoma. Um, Currently, we're trying to launch our research committee to get consistent research out of the university in the area of esports and gaming. And I'm the chair for that committee, and
Cool.
so getting formulating that committee and the way it's designed is probably foremost on my mind recently, and will continue to be as the normal way that academic research is done is you have these PhDs that are already PhDs in their area of study, and then you have people coming through an undergraduate and graduate that kind of attach to different lecturers and professors, so that have similar interests, and they teach them basically the methodology and how to do research and things. Well, we don't have the lecturers and the professors to do that, and so designing a different type of research committee, a different type of research design from an administrative standpoint, is kind of my task at the moment.
That's awesome. So is that something like specifically for the university then, right?
Yes, so it's the
Where you're pulling
University
in
of
other groups?
Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's the University of Oklahoma Esports and Gaming Research Committee.
Cool. That's awesome. I'm excited. Hey, more research we get to, the better. Obviously, like some of the times we sit here and we go, well, this is going to be outdated by the time it comes out. But like I'm sure we'll make the most of what we can. And we get to talk a little bit more about research because obviously that's kind of half of what this white paper is, right? So that's cool. The other kind of question we like to hear is we like to hear your background, starting from how did you get involved in video games in the first place, and then
Okay.
how does that lead up to your current role and involvement in esports?
So I suppose I have a stereotypical answer to how I got involved with video games, which is I was an only child and also quite a sick child.
Ah,
And so I did not go outside, and there was no other children in the house. And Ash Ketchum is a child you can you can play some
yeah,
video games with.
there you go.
So yeah, I started on Game Boy Color with Pokemon Emerald, and very quickly my dad bought me PS1, PS2, PS3, Xbox, everything. I actually only moved to PC when I was like 19 or 20, somewhere in that range. I was very much console gamer. I kind of got involved with esports for the first time. It's not before esports existed, because technically that started in the 70s, but it's before I ever heard of it, or even it became anywhere near mainstream, or even alternative stream. Is I got involved in playing on GB ladder matches in Call of Duty Black Ops 2.
Okay,
And and I wasn't very good to start. I didn't understand the difference between just like, well, I can drop 60 in a team deathmatch, and well, not team deathmatch because there's a limit, but domination, and I have to go and figure out how to get rotations, anchor spawns, get bomb down, so on and so forth. And so there was a good transition period there. But in Ghosts, my team was top 10 on the ladder globally for multiple months in a row. We won some prize money for online tournaments in a couple lands. By the time we got to Advanced Warfare, I was playing on I wouldn't consider it pro. It was not Optic Phase or anything like that, but I was playing on a contract for a very small time org that I don't think exists anymore. Um, and
That's about the way that goes, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
If you played esports, pro esports that wasn't Counter Strike or League of Legends, basically, in 2013, pro just meant, oh, I got some money, that's cool.
Yeah.
It's not really pro. It's nothing compared to what CDL or what people go through today, or even the skill level. It's not the same.
Mhm.
But I did that for a couple years. Did the very stereotypical, almost ruined my life with like 3 a.m. play sessions and like case Dr. Pepper a day and like just terrible habits. And retired, and just randomly, one of my friends, I'm a music major. My undergrad's in music, actually. One of
Wow.
my friends in the orchestra, a violinist that I'm still really good friends with, was like, "Hey, you're good at video games. My JV Overwatch team is really struggling. Do you think you can come and just like help us with like communication and like just like talking to each other and like information?" And I was like, "Never played Overwatch. Don't know, but I could try." And super long story short, 2 months later as a head coach, 6 years later, I am the competition manager for Oklahoma Esports.
And you've stayed at the University of Oklahoma. That's where you did your undergrad, right?
Yeah, no, I've been here 11 years.
Whoa.
Yeah, I switched majors 5 times in undergrad, so it took me 8 years to get out, and then I'm finishing up my master's now, and then I have a PhD after this. So
That's
they got their money's worth out of me. So
okay. Maybe I should count my blessings for being out with the Masters at 6.
Yes, you should.
All right. Well, kind of the next question as we start transitioning into this eligibility thing is, how did
Mhm.
you become involved in voice? How did you get tapped to help out with this white paper idea? And kind of what was your role and what kind of perspective did you bring heading into this project?
So a couple things. So the voice in the first place, I was told maybe a year prior to this that voice was even a thing, by Mike Aguilar, the director here at OU, that I think most people in the collegiate esports space know of. He basically said, "Hey, look, we're part of voice. We need this in the space. This is, we need some space that not only touches a lot of the really big names in our space, but also gets to their presidents. We need that support in the space." But students need to be involved in this too. And so the moment I can get a student involved, you're the first. It's you. I'm going to you the moment I can figure out how to get involved. As my earphone disconnects. One moment. So the like a year before I heard anything, that was kind of the idea. And then in what most people that know me will tell you, the normal Josh Thumper way, I bothered him every 6 weeks after that about it. And eventually he was like, "Okay, well, there's this research thing. Um, you just want to meet with them and see how it goes." And this was when I had started my master's already, and so research was already kind of in my wheelhouse. You have a master's, you understand. We
Yeah.
say in our wheelhouse. When you're a master's student, it's not in your wheelhouse.
No, it is
They
not.
tell you it should be, and you go, really?
You are
um,
deluded into thinking that you
exactly, yeah.
can do the research
Um,
thing.
it's positive reinforcement till maybe
Yes.
you believe it.
Yes.
And so, but so it was in my wheelhouse, and I went to them and had a discussion with Jesse and Russell, and they basically were like, at the time I wasn't gonna get authorship. Like it was essentially an internship. That was basically like, hey, um, we need someone to do this aspects of this, and we both don't have time because they're both directors. And also, another perspective might help a little bit with this. And my perspective comes from, I was in the trenches for 6 years. I coached my Overwatch team. We were one of, if not the only, Overwatch team that placed top 12 without a single former pro player or scholarships consistently. My players consistently outperformed their ranks and took maps off people they probably shouldn't have. And so to do that as a coach, especially in Collegiate, when my players, they come from Calculus 3 and then they have to come and play Overwatch or something.
Right.
To do that, it requires, okay, we're going to have 4 scrim blocks a week, plus we're playing in 3 matches a week, plus we're going to do one-on-one VOD reviews, plus we're going to have a 2-hour team building session and teamwork, team chemistry session. I'm requiring 25 hours a week for my players and 35 for myself. And so when it comes to stuff like that, my perspective was much more, all right, I'm coming from the trenches here. I never competed collegiately, but I've competed before, and I've spent 35 hours a week for the last 5-6 years with my players in both Valorant and Overwatch. And I know what this takes. I know what needs to be done here. And when they mentioned eligibility, I think a lot of people could sympathize with the idea of like eligibility's less so today, but especially even when they asked me this a year ago, and especially over those 5 years, especially during COVID, eligibility is a thorn in our sides. And I jumped on that just because it's like, well, if we can get any stability or anything here, I am more than willing to put in the work for it.
And so obviously this paper comes along as this
Mhm.
first step of that stability, right? We got to start
Yeah.
somewhere, so we should start by synthesizing what we know. And to me, that's kind of what this paper feels like. What do you
Yep.
think the kind of main objective of the paper was? And then, kind of walk me through what the thought process was in terms of how to set this up, how kind of the pieces come together to write this thing.
So you hit the nail on the head. Quite literally, it was pitched to me in that very first meeting with Russell and Jesse that this is a landscape study. It's let's take a good snapshot of the landscape as is. Um, and so that was really a big portion, I'd say a very large portion of the study, and then a very small portion of it was a small portion of that survey that we put out that was basically saying, okay, you've told us what you think the landscape is and what the importance of things are. And we've done the research of the landscape of overall collegiate, not just NCAA, but NCAA, Division 1, 2, 3, JUCO, NJCAA, NAIA, non-national things like robotics competition, collegiate competitions, chess collegiate competitions, fishing collegiate competitions, all sorts of stuff. So we have a good idea of what we're standing in. Great. Now what's the first step? How do we get to where in this landscape we actually want to be? Do we want to be the NCAA? No. But we need to know that. That's something we need to figure out.
Right.
And so a very small portion of that survey was asking these 71, I think it was 71
Yeah.
directors, hey, where would you like what do you want the first step to be? Can we maybe get a consensus or at least a majority on, hey, this probably should be the first step. And that's really what this white paper was about was, hey, we don't know where we are, so let's figure that out. And then let's ask the people that have the biggest stakeholds in this industry to ask what they think the first step should be. And that was the paper.
And so what do we find, right? What is that first
Right.
step that needs taken? Because
So
we're looking around like somebody's got to make a move.
so coordinator from University of Wisconsin, Green Bay, right?
Yep,
So I don't know if you were one of the people that took the anonymous survey, and because it was anonymous, I'm
I
not
was
going to
not.
ask you. But I will ask you, what do you think the first step should be?
um, well, I mean, it kind of depends on how we set it up, right? There's
Yep.
a lot of different ways this can go.
Hmm.
And I think it comes with how we actually want things to look. I think we'll get into this in a little bit, but I'm of the belief that actually the leagues should have different requirements and have different rules to attract different parts of collegiate, right?
Interesting.
There
Okay.
should be, in my opinion, there should be a separate conference where the clubs are playing, and there should be a separate conference where the varsity teams are playing, and there should be a separate conference where the full ride varsity teams are playing,
Right.
right?
Right.
And
Okay.
obviously, like, none of the
So
competition organizers want to be like, oh, we're going to be the varsity team and we're going to be the club
right.
one, right? Which makes it incredibly difficult. But that's what I think should happen if we could all, sing around the campfire and clap
So
our hands.
that immediately goes into some of the questions of, okay, that's not step 1, that's probably step 12. And
Right,
so why?
exactly.
So why? Well, the first one, not even the first one, but one of the issues that you brought up, define varsity,
Hmm.
define club. Okay. Scholarship, non-scholarship is fairly well defined, but are we going to let the full rides in with the non-full rides? Because scholarship is any amount. If
Right.
if we gave $2 to our players, technically they're on scholarship. Okay. Now, is that even a fraction of a percent of our tuition? No, but it's the idea. Okay. And
Right.
so that's where we have to start with step 1 and figure things out. Is step 1 what it actually is do these directors think that eligibility is an important point in our industry? So that might seem like well, duh, of course it is. But when you're in this industry, you understand we have a lot more than one problem that needs to be solved. Like a lot more.
No, really?
So the
You
question,
think?
yeah, maybe a couple.
Maybe
So
a
the
few.
problem isn't really whether eligibility is a problem we need to address. Duh, of course it is. Is it a problem of high importance that we probably need to address soon? That's really the answer. And so we essentially asked that, and we got a pretty, what I would consider maybe the only consensus in the study, which is out of a Likert scale from 1 to 5, it was like a 4.34, I think.
Yeah.
That was, hey, out of 71 directors, the average importance of this topic was a 4.34. And to me, even more telling is there was not a single person that graded a 1 or a 2. So 71 directors, every single one, regardless of where in the country they are, if they're a club, if they're a full-time employee, if they are director level, if they have a department or they're a student organization, no matter what, no one thought it was unimportant. And most people thought it was very important.
Right.
So I think that step 1 is to understand, hey, we have a pretty good consensus of not only is this important, but it's probably it's a problem. And it's a problem that needs to be addressed. So that's really step 1. Now, does that in the landscape does that make us move? No, but it gives us permission to start moving, is the point. In this analogy we're using.
Right.
And so that was really when it comes to research, a lot of people say, oh, okay, well, you did research on this, but I think that was fairly obvious in the first place. And it's like, okay, we do research to not only create new, but to confirm the known. And it's important that we confirm that.
Yeah.
Because even if the known is 2% off, well, that's a really big change when you think about down the road, multiple decisions, 2% off every single time. That's a pretty big change. So that was kind of the big first step for this study and what it proved. After that, it immediately gets murky.
Right.
I mean, immediately, like no one agrees on anything.
Yeah.
Well, I shouldn't say that. There were actually some things that were agreed upon, in vast majority. So in super majority, not even
Hmm.
51%, but we're talking well over 75, 80%. The
Sure.
first one is in some form or fashion, GPA has to be taken into consideration. At the end of the day, these are students.
Right.
So I was very happy to see that because, there were times in our history, not recently, but there's been times in our history, 2018 to 2021 mostly. I wasn't sure that some of these programs did think that they were students. That has changed, and the viewpoint of that has changed. Um, and a lot of those programs either have proved me wrong or are no longer programs. Um, but for the most part, I don't think there's a program that exists nowadays in collegiate esports that doesn't view their players as students. Now, I don't know if they would all of them view their players as students first, but they view them as students nonetheless. And so agreed upon that, yeah, okay, yeah, GPA, that's a big one. That needs to be considered in some capacity.
Right.
What capacity? Well, we didn't agree on that, but some capacity. So I'll tell you what OU does with GPA, and then maybe you can tell me what you do.
Yeah.
And then we can talk about it. So we've changed this a few times, but currently our policy, and we've changed it a few times because every time we try to improve upon it, and I think this is a pretty good policy, is we have a flat line, no gray zone or buffer zone, 2.5 minimum GPA. You have to get a half B's and half C's. Minimum, absolute minimum. If you are below a 2.5, you get a strike against you. If it is your first strike, you are benched and you cannot be on an outwardly facing roster, meaning you can't represent OU in any way, shape, or form until midterms of the following semester. If at midterms of the following semester you're above a 2.5, you can be reinstated and finish out the semester. If you get a second strike on your record, you do not have the midterm exception rule. You're just gone for a full semester until you prove that you can do a full semester and perform well academically. If you get a third strike, for the rest of your academic career, you can no longer represent esports at the University of Oklahoma. It's essentially a lifetime ban. Okay.
Wow.
Now, in our space, that's quite a harsh GPA policy, but I'll explain why that's our policy. Okay. We started tracking the majors and what we have as far as our students. We are over 70% STEM. We're over 85% STEAM. Nowadays, and this is the meme, right? Is like you get a college degree. Okay, well, you need 7 years experience. Well, I'm 22, so I can't work when I'm 15. Well, one of the ways you get that experience and you get that in with companies is internships. In STEM and STEAM fields, you will not be considered for an interview if you are below a 3.0. It won't happen. Unless you already have an in, like with a family member, a friend or something, it will not happen. So we had to sit down and really look at like, okay, 2.0 is kind of the norm, so to speak, for a lot of stuff. I can't let my players have a 2.0. They're not going to come out with a worthwhile degree because
it's about student success.
It's about student success. And a 2.0 doesn't get it done. And if I'm being totally honest with you, a 2.5 is not going to get it done either. But we wanted to at least start there and be reasonable. And I'll be honest, it's going to go up to a 2.75 in the next year. It might be a 3 within the next 3 to 5 years. And that's because this is student success. And if they're at a 2.5 flat, they're probably still not successful, but it's better than a 2. And we gave the 3 strike rule because, listen, I don't know how long you've been a being able to check students' grades or been in this in administrative position.
It's been about a month.
Okay, all right.
This is my first year running a program, right? So I'm still learning alongside what else going on here in general. So like I've got my like, oh yeah, I got a loose 2.0 requirement and I'm going to do grade checks, and one of my leagues requires a registrar form to be signed and filled out. So that's an easy thing.
And we need to get to leagues eventually, but I'll finish this. I'll finish this in saying that you learn over the course of 2 to 3 years very quickly that so we actually cut all B rosters, all JV rosters, B rosters, whatever you want to call them, this summer. But we had B rosters up until this summer.
Presumably they're still club teams?
No.
Not at all.
No. If you want to do another podcast, we can talk about how we've designed this department, but that's a little much for eligibility.
Right. Yeah.
But we cut all B rosters and we cut 2 full titles, and we're probably going to cut about 5 more within the next 8 months. And that's a whole lot of business decisions, to be honest. It's not academic.
How many
or
total
decisions.
Do you have then?
We had 22. We're at 18 titles, 15 developments right now.
22 titles, yeah. No wonder you cut down on your
Exactly,
development rosters.
So yeah,
I mean,
pretty logical, yeah.
Yeah.
So I was in charge last year. I was in charge of 165 students. The year before that, we hovered around between 140 and 165 for about 4 or 5 years. I'm only at 106 this year, so it's a vast improvement.
Right.
But that all to say, out of those 160, we would have consistently, maybe 5 to 10 that even if we had a 2.0, no, they would have struggled. They would have been below it. They would have had academic problems. And then, interestingly, before we had the 2.5 policy, we had a 2.0 policy, and we had a gray zone between 2 and 2.5. And we had, but 2.0, you were kind of okay. When we had that policy, we had another 10 to 20 that were kind of in that zone. Since switching to the 2.5 policy, instead of having 30 people below a 2.5, we have 12 on average. So if you set the standard for what we're going by is if you set the academic standard for the student, they will live up to the academic standard. And so going by that, that's kind of how we've designed our eligibility in reference to GPA. There's other things, but in reference to GPA, that is how we've designed our eligibility. You said you have a soft 2.0. You've been there for a month, so
I'm kind of inheriting like the loose,
Mhm.
guidelines that we're kind of forming, and now it's my job to come in and make them formal. But of course,
Mhm.
to do that, I have to be around a little bit first to figure out the way
Yeah,
this
of course. You
was
can't make instant
previously.
changes.
Yeah, right.
Not only because, hey, I don't know how old UW Green Bay is. Oklahoma's 130 something.
Yeah.
130-year-old institution doesn't change overnight.
Yeah, what we celebrate our 50 year soon, I think.
Yeah,
60 years? 60
50,
years.
even
I
50,
think it'll be
60s.
60.
I
Yeah,
mean, think of a 60-year-old. You're gonna
right.
change their opinion overnight?
Yeah,
Probably not.
yeah,
So it's the same idea. Um, and so interestingly, um, most everyone agreed on GPA. Most everyone agreed on, hey, we have to deal with this in some capacity. They did more heavily lean towards 2.0. Okay.
right.
Which is why I explained why we're at 2.5. It's about
Sure.
student success. It's about STEM and STEAM. If you're at, frankly, in my personal opinion, if they're at a liberal arts college and they're trying to get arts degrees or degrees that don't rely on internships or don't rely on rely on portfolio more than a GPA, I have no issues with 2.0 at all. But for us, and the fact that
Right.
this is a mostly STEM STEAM university, this is an R1 Division 1 university. Yeah, 2.5 makes more sense for student success.
Right.
And so I'm of the mind that yes, GPA needs to address, just like basically every other director I've ever talked to and took the survey agrees.
Right.
But in addition to that, maybe 2.0 is where we start. But there was an interesting caveat. I don't know if you picked it out, which was not in the survey, but it was in the research. And it's called the academic progress rate. It's the
Right.
APR. So it's by the NCAA. And it's something I found when I was doing the preliminary landscape, where I was looking at other institutions and how they deal with it. And there's a new one that's called graduation success rate, which is it's the kind of the same thing, same idea, but it's essentially a formula that takes the team and the department into consideration instead of the individual. And they use it for playoff eligibility. And so instead of using it as, hey, we're going to judge your players based on what they did last semester, whether they can even compete or your team can compete this year, it's less harsh. It's saying you can complete your regular season, not an issue. But then we need the transcripts from that regular season. And we need the transcripts of your players and everything. And we're going to put the players as a whole into this formula. And if you're below a certain threshold, I think it's 810, but I can't remember off the top of my head, out of 1,000, or it might be 910 out of 1,000, then your team is not eligible to compete in the playoffs. You competed, you had a regular season, your players were allowed to represent their university, your university was allowed to go through with their TV contracts because it's the NCAA, so on and
Right.
so forth. you're just not allowed to play a bowl game or a playoff game or March Madness or anything else, which is still a severe penalty, by the way.
Yeah.
But it's not no hold bar. You don't have a program for a year.
Right.
And I thought that was extremely interesting
Mhm.
because it is a middle ground that I think people could agree on. It's a middle ground that says, okay, if you have one bad player, you're not sunk. But if your entire program isn't prioritizing academics, that will sink you.
Yeah, absolutely. With all this talk about player eligibility and different league rules, you might be considering what competitions your program is participating in the upcoming semester. Playfly College Esports just released their Spring 2025 Roadmap to Registration, which details several major changes coming to their competitions next year. Schools can submit their varsity applications for the upcoming Spring 2025 semester and the 2025 through 2026 academic year now and register for all competitions starting on December 10th. Details on the spring merch drop and the Tournament of Champions at CECC May Madness will be available in the coming weeks. You can scan the QR code on screen now for more information or go to www.playflycollege.gg for more information. Thanks again to Playfly College Esports for sponsoring this episode of Torchbearers. Now, back to my conversation with Josh.
I think that's an interesting point. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, that is one of the things that was on my list of, okay,
Sure.
we should probably hit this at some point, right? Is this
Mhm.
academic progress thing? Because it is important to have those players continue and students continue to go forward and make sure that they are actively moving in that, right? And we're not just sitting here resting on our laurels, right?
Mhm.
Um, I thought, like in reading up a little bit, I did. The NCAA is cut off, uh, according to when this last was written, which
Mhm.
there is no date on this article. Um, but the 4-year average APR limit was 930
930. Okay.
out of a possible 1,000,
Mhm.
which is very high by the sounds of it, to
So it's
me
not that
anyway.
high.
But I have obviously haven't gone through the process of doing a calculation myself,
Mhm.
so whether or not that's high, right? But like assuming that 93, I mean, in effect, 93% of your players are completely sound, right?
Mhm.
Feels very high, especially for programs that could be smaller too, right?
Mhm.
Where that
So
could like 3 students could make a difference.
yeah, I mean, you make a very good point. I mean, I just said I have 106.
Right.
So for us to get a 93, we could have probably what, 10, no, 15 players not reach that number and we'd be fine, as
Yeah.
opposed to our friends up the road at like Oklahoma Central University or something that have like 40,
Yeah.
and if they have two, they're done. Um so I get it. Math wasn't right, but you get the point. So like I
Close to that.
yeah,
Point
it's
being.
it's like 4, I think, but whatever. So you get the point. Is like it's not a direct translate. I'm not saying that we should adopt the APR. I'm not saying that it's a direct translate. I am saying that it shows us a way to calculate a program's willingness to treat their players as students first and to make sure that the players are prioritizing their academics and the degree that's going to get them the career that they're going to use for the next 50 years rather than the play that they're going to have for the next 2 years.
Right.
um it gives us a way without completely shutting down programs. It gets us a way without saying your players can't compete. It gives us a way without that. And so it was an interesting find amongst the other things on the list, and it prompted one of the issues, which was academic progress, degree completion, and enrollment status. Which you talked about. I think it was probably Nice. I know Nice does this, but one of your things wanted transcripts, wanted academic records to allow your players to play, right?
For us, it's the WEC. That's
WEC. Okay, I
that.
don't know that one.
It's a basically it's a new conference.
Okay.
That's just the schools in Wisconsin.
Okay.
Uh,
Great.
so yeah, it's just a regional thing for us. But they required a. They didn't require transcripts. They required a form passed off to the registrar and the registrar signed off that every student was academically
Okay.
eligible per the institution's standards.
hmm
That's basically what the form was just requiring.
Yeah, and we've had that form before. I think Nice has given
Yeah.
us that form before. I don't know that Nace has, but I don't want to say they haven't either because I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But we've had SEL and a few others give us those forms before. It's a good stopgap, and it's also a good segue for this conversation of, hey,
Like, how does this happen?
yeah,
Right?
like
Because
how do we
that's
do this?
another can of worms.
And I think actually it's probably the main can of worms
Right.
is
Right.
because I think if you want to take a 10,000-foot survey view of this survey, I think what the survey kind of does say is the schools can agree. We can agree on things. And the small dissensions that were among them, I don't want to say are trivial, but they're navigatable.
Yeah.
And the larger dissensions are things like, okay, well, maybe we learn from our traditional athletic peers and don't put a 40,000 person university in the same rule set and conference set as a 400 person university. Okay?
Mind blown.
That might be just something that universally has to happen. We have and this is not a new concept to esports. We have the OKSE, the Oklahoma Scholastic Esports is here in Oklahoma. It is, to my knowledge, the biggest and most successful state level K through 12 esports initiative in the country. They have over 300 and I think 350 high schools, middle schools, and elementary schools participating in 12 titles a year. It's like over 15,000 K through 12 students are actively participating, representing their schools in esports right now. I don't think that exists anywhere else. Okay? They split the 5A, the 6A schools from the 3 and the 4A, from the 1A and the 2A. They call it Bison Division, Whitetail Division, and Scissortail Division. Literally the largest animal, a deer, and a bird. Because if the 1A, and I know this because I know that and I don't mind saying this, I'm friends and I'm very good colleagues with with Laverne High School, which is it's up in the Panhandle of Oklahoma. It's the middle of nowhere. I've driven there one time. The school graduates like 40 people a year. Okay. It's a tiny, tiny school. They've won that Scissortail division in multiple titles. The guy could walk in with like 8 state championship rings and a bunch of medals and trophies on both hands. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
He's amazing. His name's Mike. He's amazing, Mike Shipley. If one of his teams tried to fight the Bison division, they'd get completely demolished. Okay? It's just math. If one school has a 150 person population to pull from, and the other school has a 4,000 population to pull from, who's going to have more SSLs in Rocket League? Who's going to have more Grandmasters?
And everybody knows this.
Everybody knows this. So the schools and the schools know this. And so the schools can agree. The schools can agree on most of this, and the things we don't agree on, we can work out. And we can work out ways to navigate it and make it work. We basically know that, not from only just working with each other and the fact that we can have these conversations, but also because, hey, we surveyed 71 of them.
Right.
And that's a big portion of them, actually.
Yeah.
And they mostly agreed on like a lot of stuff. Now there was a couple sticking points, and I'm sure you're gonna bring them up. There's a couple major sticking points. Amateurism, for example.
Yeah.
But the schools are not the only stakeholders that need to agree. The companies need to agree. NACE, Nice, specifically those two. NACE and Nice, but also the developers of the games. Blizzard.
When you say Nice, you
Valve,
mean NACC, right?
NECC, yeah.
Just
NECC
okay.
and NACE.
I was like, what league is he talking? Okay.
Nice, yeah.
Right.
NECC and NACE. They also have to agree. I don't disagree with what you said at the very beginning, which was where I would want this to go is that there's a space in different leagues and different conferences for the varsity programs and the club programs and this and that. And we had versions of that. I mean, NACE had like a paid and a free, and even those were split up into like varsity and open divisions, right? We've had versions of this.
Playfly basically took that model and is running
exactly.
with it.
Yeah. We've had versions, but the idea, the only way we achieve that is if these companies stop trying to be monopolies and recreate NCAA and things like that. I'm not calling
Hmm.
anyone specific out, but that's what's happening.
Yep.
And instead, actually, I'm an MBA, so this is business administration lingo, but actually figure out their customer segments and actually target their customer segments and cater to their customers. Because you cannot say my customer segment is collegiate esports. That's like saying my customer segment is the United States. It doesn't work
Yeah.
because do you know how many people are at your university?
We've got about 7,000.
Okay, you have 7,000. We have 30,000.
Right.
The University of Texas has 90,000.
Yeah.
There are universities, I think Texas A&M is one of them, that is well above 6 digits.
Yeah.
We're not the same.
Right.
We can't pull the
And
same
we shouldn't
resources.
try to be
And we shouldn't try to be.
either.
Yeah. And if you want examples about, how the schools can agree on this, Maryville is a very successful university
Hmm.
and a very successful esports program. I mean, very successful. I think when they started that program, their concurrent enrollment was like 1,500. They're over 4,000. And I'm not saying that's all due to their esports program. I know for a fact a lot of it's due to their esports program.
Absolutely.
Nobody knew where Maryville was or what it was until that esports program, and specifically that Overwatch team.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's successful. That's great. If we had tried to copy Maryville's business strategy at the University of Oklahoma, we would have flopped in 3 months. We're not, and vice versa.
Right.
It's not the same. There's different regions. There's different size differences. There's different demographics. It's not the same. And the schools can agree on this. But we need these companies that are building these that are helping a major stakeholder in this industry. We need them to understand that they are not the same. You cannot treat them the same. And there is value, there's profit to be made on most of those customer segments, but we need you to choose the customer segment. We don't need a one-size-fits-all model because a one-size doesn't fit all. And we kind of need them to understand that.
So, going further into the paper,
Sure.
a conversation with the league operators was a part of this
Yes, it
white
was.
paper.
Yep.
It seems like they're like, oh, yeah, this is a problem, but we don't really have the resources to do it. But I have a hard time believing that any league is going to be the first to admit that they don't want to target everybody.
Of course.
So, like, where did that conversation end up? Because, like, obviously it has to be an ongoing conversation even still, right?
Yeah.
Because it's really like kind of what we're talking about goes beyond just eligibility. It's kind of just fundamental in general in terms of how we're setting the space up overall. I mean, I've just a couple weeks ago, I know there was a conversation that came up about like reschedule policies, right?
Mhm.
Reschedule policies are going to look different for different programs, and that came up in the conversation.
Mhm.
Um, so really, like a lot of what we're talking about is even broader picture than just the small scale eligibility stuff. It's all right. How are we setting up this ecosystem so that both the NCAA Division One can thrive as much as Division Three can thrive as much as the NAIA?
Yeah. I mean, the long and short answer to that is obviously I don't know. That I mean, that's going to be the long and short answer of most of what we're talking about. I have opinions. None of them are solutions, actually. So I'm not here to say I have solutions.
Right.
I will say this. A lot of what I was not directly part of the conversation. That was mostly, I think it was mostly Jesse, but I think both of my peers were in those conversations. But from hearing the results of those and reading the paper and everything as well, a lot of what the so first we kind of have to split our leagues because we have different types. We have developer leagues, we have grassroots leagues, and we have what I would call third-party leagues. Okay. Developer leagues are run by the developers of the titles they're running the leagues for. So Blizzard runs Overwatch Homecoming, Collegiate Homecoming.
Right.
Okay. Riot runs CVAL and League of Legends. Okay. Those are developer leagues. Then we have grassroots leagues. So these are the cephalopod. You said you're a Splatoon guy. The cephalopod association. Okay. These are leagues that are just, hey, we're really
CCL, Omega
CCL.
Strikers.
We are passionate about the game. They're probably currently students running the leagues. Octane League for Apex is another one.
Yeah.
And they want to do that. Then we have our third-party leagues, which are the names that I've already mentioned. So this is Nice, Nace, that type. Okay, these are the leagues that they have run a company model off of. We are tournament organizers and tournament runners for Collegiate Esports. Okay, all right. These are 3 different animals. Okay, and I'm going to give a fairly hot take for all 3.
You're locked in right now, aren't you? On the edge of your seat, just waiting to hear what Josh's hot takes are. Well, we'll get back to his hot takes in a moment. But first, I'll bet you want to be that focused all the time. If you do, Neuropa, our sponsors of today's episode, have a product designed specifically for you. Neuropa's flow state isn't just another quick energy fix. It's designed to help you focus longer, stay sharp, and actually feel better, and does it by combining nearly 5 times the nootropics of traditional energy supplements with both instant and delayed release caffeine to fuel your brain and body. It's like energy redefined, basically. Smarter, cleaner, and built to help keep you going for longer with game-changing cognitive enhancement. If you're still downing those other energy drinks, it might be time to rethink what you're doing to stay on top of your game. Recently, Neuropa was kind enough to send me one of their ice shakers and one of their raspberry lemonade flow state flavors. And I've got to say, after finding the right dosage for me, I tried it and I was convinced. I feel a lot better throughout my day and a lot more concentrated and productive too. And I'll bet you could use it as well. You can try it by going to their website, neuroptima.gg, and using code CEN for 10% off your order. Thanks so much again to Neuropa for supporting this episode of Torchbearers. Now let's hear what Josh has to say.
The first one, developer leagues have to go. They should not exist. Okay? Now, why? First reason, when you do research, you go through the Institutional Review Board, the IRB, to make sure that you're not harming your human participants, and through that process you have to turn in a form saying that you have no you're not doing this for external reasons, or you're not doing this for any other thing. Developer leagues, almost by definition, cannot put the students or the collegiate scene first. They can't. Because they're not a collegiate tournament organizer. They are a developer of a game. Okay?
Who is looking to continue making money off of said game.
Yes. Now, does that mean that it's purely an evil practice? No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that it is... Can you imagine a world, because I can't, where a hundreds of millions of dollars company in Riot or Blizzard, because those are the main 2 examples, but we can extend this to Valve or anything else, put legitimate resources, I'm talking about millions of dollars worth of staffing and production, into developing the collegiate scene for their title. No, I can't either.
In fact, we're watching them scale back right now.
Yes.
We've watched CRL go from a full league 2 times a year, now down to 4 open tournaments this time around. We're watching Riot go from top 8 to get to LA to top 2 from each game, now are going to Boise, Idaho, which love Boise, Idaho. Don't like the decision from Riot, as a lot of people were disgruntled by, right? So we're watching them already scale back and pull out from providing those kinds of resources to the collegiate space.
Yeah, and because they don't have the resources to provide. That's not true. It's not within their best interest business model-wise to provide those resources. They actually probably have the most resources to provide. But it's not within their best interest to do so. And it will probably never be within their best interest to do so. Okay. Now, I don't want to say never because there is a very small world where it would be. And it's the world in which the OU esports brand or the Maryville esports brand is worth more or equivalent to the Overwatch brand. Okay, now it might be worth it because now they're saying, okay, this is no longer something we're giving you to elevate your program and to be able to showcase our game. Now this is a partnership. But that is, I'll be
Decades away.
Yes. Yeah. I was going to say, I'll be nice and say that it's 10 years away. It's 20 to 30 years
Decades.
away. Okay.
Yeah.
It's not here. No, almost none of the games that we're playing right now in collegiate esports will still be played as an esport by the time that that's a reality, in all likelihood. Okay. So that's column one. And that's my hot take is those need to not exist. Okay.
I could have like reacted to you saying that to drop
Apparently it's
and
not
like
that hard
drop
of
the
a take.
mic. No, I mean, I hear you. Like, obviously, like at first you go, well, what in the world did he just say? But then
Yeah.
you're like, okay, this is starting to make sense. Now, maybe there's a world where we can hope that developers can invest in some of the endemic leagues, which I'm sure you'll get to
Sure.
later. But
Yes.
maybe there's a chance for them to be able to do something like that to
Yeah.
help out a little bit and
They can be
encourage growth.
stakeholders.
Yeah, absolutely.
They can't run it.
Right.
Okay. And by can't run it, to bring it back to this white paper fully, they can't be the ones writing the rules. That can't be an idea that is had. Okay.
Yeah.
We get to the grassroots leagues. Okay. Hot take on the grassroots leagues. Okay. That is an indication that we are not doing our jobs. Frankly, that is what that is. The idea that there are so many students that want to participate in an esport and that are willing to not only play the esport, but put in the managerial and administrative duties required to run a league on top of being an undergrad or graduate student. And that there are no schools, tournaments, or anyone else that will take up the mantle for those means that we're not doing the job properly. Something is wrong. Okay. Those leagues are necessary and I like them and I think that they are, but I think they're an indication of a something that a paradigm shift that needs to happen within the industry. Okay. So that one's not that hot of a take, I don't think.
No, I don't think so.
So
I mean,
I'll push that one aside.
we're talking right about student success, which is the large part of why some of these other eligibility requirements come up, right?
I think it's why all of them come up.
Right,
Pretty
exactly.
much.
To be successful and to be a decent, have a good time on campus, you also have to have that social outlet, which for the players who are playing in those grassroots league, that is their game title. They're playing in that league not because it's free. They're playing in that league because that's their game. That's the one they're playing, and that's where their friends are. That's where their community is. So yeah,
and if at a university
absolutely.
you want to be reaching students, what kind of students you want to be reaching? Self-starters that will
Right.
go the extra mile, put in the extra work, and want to do an A isn't good enough for them. An A, and then I also have internship experience. I also have
Yeah.
research experience. Okay, well, who's doing that? The one creating these leagues.
Yeah. Right.
So why is that not the investment? Why is that not what we're looking at? I mean, look at Splatoon, look at Octane League, which is Apex. Look at Mario Kart Collegiate. These are well-run leagues.
Yeah.
Like very well-run leagues. In fact, they eclipse some of the other leagues that are not within this grassroots bucket. But they're still grassroots. They're kind of pushed off as not important. Who cares? National championships are over here, so we don't care about that.
There's also the problem of IP
Why?
rights and everything, by the way, when we're talking about
Yeah, I know.
Nintendo things and how
Yes,
businesses don't
Nintendo
want
is
to
a
get
whole
involved with
Mario
that.
Kart,
But
Splatoon, yeah,
yeah,
over there.
right. That's why they're off to the side also,
Yes.
just as much as anything else.
But Smash is competed in Nice
That's true.
and Nace, I think. So
yeah. Is it? I mean, I guess
maybe
probably.
not. I don't know. It's in one of those two, right?
It is in any.
So it's not like it's not doable.
Right.
So that's kind of that bucket. And then the third bucket, and there's a fourth, and you alluded to it, but the third bucket is Nace the third party leagues. Okay, I am undecided on these. To be honest, I am not convinced that they have the best interest of students or collegiate esports in mind. That being said, I'm not unconvinced of it. I'm not convinced that they won't cut corners to get bigger names or get better players involved or whatever else. That being said, I'm not accusing one of anything. And even if
Yep.
this was not recorded and we were just sitting around and we were great friends, I still wouldn't have a name to give you as far as like, well, I think
Right.
these people are breaking the rules. That's not what I'm
Right.
saying. I'm saying I'm not sure what their priorities are. I don't think that they're very transparent with their priorities or what they're trying to do, and therefore I don't trust them. And it's not a trust. It's not a I don't trust you because I have a reason not to trust you. It's I don't trust you because you haven't given me a reason to trust you.
Yeah.
And so I don't know.
Right.
It may be great. It may be another NCAA, which is obviously not great, but it's better than free for all. Okay. It may be something better, much better, or much worse than either one of those. I don't know. And so that's like the third bucket. And
The
then the
one
fourth
thing
bucket,
the
go
one
ahead.
thing I'll push back on a little bit there is I think NACE in particular, with the way they have their leadership structure set up, I mean, it is like a board of directors that are, reporting, and there's a competition council. Each one of these parties is made up of collegiate directors. So
Sure.
in theory, the organization is set up such that it is directors that are making the decision who are thinking about their own students when they're making those rules. Now, obviously, maybe they're not thinking about the space as a whole. They're not thinking about every institution, but they
Sure.
are at least thinking about students when they're doing it.
So and Nice has it too. Nice has the
Yeah,
directors and the. I don't know who's actually making the decisions.
which is true. There's no
That's the thing.
transparency in who does what,
You can say, hey, we
except
have
kind
these
of NACE.
committees.
But
You can say we have these committees. You can say we have all these schools involved, and you can say, hey, because you pay us dues, you can vote on something. Great. Who actually makes the decision at the end of all that? After all the committees advise and we vote on everything and you get all the input, who's in that chair? I don't know. I don't know. And because I don't know, I can't sit there and go, okay, well, you're the one making decisions. Let me talk to you, or let me at
right,
least hear you talk. Let me
right.
hear you talk about, okay, what's your priorities? What do you talk about most often? What seems to be brought up, or where do you naturally pull and push conversations? I don't know because I don't know who that is. It's a faceless man or woman in a room. And so that third party, don't get me wrong, we've needed them. They've done good work. I'm not at all bad talking them.
Yeah,
I don't know who they are. And that gets to
yeah.
the fourth one where it's
Uh,
like, what?
Forgive me for a second. Michael Brooks, right, is
Sure.
previous director
Hmm.
of NACE. He retires and,
Yep.
goes on to do
A
other
month ago,
things.
3 months ago, 3 weeks ago, something like that.
Not long ago,
Yeah.
from when we're recording this. It'll maybe have been about a month or two by the time this releases. But, uh, a bunch of people are like, thanks so much for what you do. But those are already the vocal, people in the space who know what's going on behind the scenes. Whereas
Sure.
the rest of us go, okay, yeah, like I figure this guy's important, but I didn't know everything he did
Hmm.
up to now.
And I don't need to know everything you do, but
Right.
I need to put a face to the organization or a
Yeah.
group of faces.
Right.
Where I say, okay, I like this decision. Who made it? I have no idea. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Right.
And so that's a problem with that. And then we get to the fourth bucket, which you alluded to, and I left out, which may be the solution, which is endemic leagues, our actual leagues. So OU joined the SEC. All 16 universities have esports entities. We can create an SEC esports league, and
Yeah.
we can be the only stakeholders involved in that league.
Yeah.
Now, we've tried. There have been things. WEC,
WEC, BEC, Missouri
PEC, which we're also a
Valley.
part of, Missouri Valley,
Yeah.
the Mountain West something.
Probably. I believe it.
It's actually got some big names in it, but the Mountain West Division or Conference. These are kind of the fourth bucket of okay, well, this is the flip side of the coin. Is and these are two flip sides of the coin. So we have the developer leagues, which has all the resources, but really doesn't want to put any of them in. And then we have the grassroots leagues, which have none of the resources, but anything they do have, they're throwing it at this thing. So that's flip side of the same coin, the resource coin. And then we have the other coin, which is these third-party leagues, which are not very transparent. We don't know who's making decisions. We don't know where the priorities lie. We're not really sure where things are happening. And the other side of that coin is these endemic leagues of okay, well, this is just us. These 71 directors, these are the directors. These are us making decisions for the best part of our programs as a whole, as a conference, and our students. Great. Full transparency. But these both have issues still. I mean, the transparency sure is an issue. Full transparency, great. But who's actually running it? Can you imagine directors of 16 SEC schools getting in a call and being able to talk efficiently? I can't.
No.
It's not possible. Oh, well, I'm the director of Texas. Oh, I'm the director of Mississippi State. Well, I'm the director of Georgia. Yeah, that'll go over great. So how does endemic leagues run? How do they work?
Right.
Is there a model that has worked for multiple years consistently? And is it transferable? I don't know. And so we
then,
have those ideas.
if we go there, where's the national championship come from? Because
Yes.
it sounds like we might be drifting towards you build your own conference, and then we have a top 25 poll that we vote on at the end. Whoa, wait, that sounds familiar.
Yeah, it's almost like history repeating itself in traditional sports.
Wow.
It's almost like we're a sport. So it's
Don't say that too loud.
It's very difficult. It's not. It's something that we need to figure out, and we need to figure out faster than traditional sports did. That's for sure. But it's something we need to figure out. But it's certainly something worth looking at. And it's certainly something that is needs to be addressed more in the mainstream than other things, because there are things in this eligibility paper that, frankly, I'm not entirely sure need to be addressed. And there are things like amateurism that I think are egregious in our space currently.
So let's get into it.
Okay,
Amateurism.
sure.
There's a million things, right, with this, because there isn't the path to pro that there is in traditional sports. That
Sure.
has not been set up for our purpose, right? So
Sure.
we have former professionals coming back in who were professionals that are still obviously great at the video game, but
Mhm.
now they're coming back in to play for a collegiate team.
Right.
Are they precluded? How long should they be precluded for? I mean, all those are questions that get this issue incredibly messy.
Mhm.
And I feel like nobody's ever going to have the perfect solution for this.
Yeah, and I kind of agree with you. I have a pretty hard stance. If you have taken money to play in a game based on your performance, you no longer eligible to compete in collegiate esports. I have a pretty hard stance on that. That comes from my experience. That comes from I was an Overwatch coach, and I had to see my guys come from chemistry lab, calculus 3, and gods and heroes in art, and sit
Right.
down at a computer and play active pros. People that were actively competing in professional leagues and being paid for their services. Okay. Now, the directors pretty much agreed on active pros are out in this survey, and I understand
Sure.
that. I don't think they should ever be allowed to compete again. And we just kind of stated it. Esports is a sport. The research has bared that out over a decade.
Yeah.
Okay. We just let NFL players come back if they want a college degree. We just let a 7-foot NBA player that has been playing against grown men their entire life for 8 years, and now they washed out of the league, so they're going to go score 40 on poor, Santa Fe State. No. Okay. And people are like, oh, well, it's not athletics. It doesn't take into consideration, it doesn't matter if you're 7 foot or 5'2". That's like that's the advantage of esports. 100% agree. 1000% agree. So tell me, if my players were in high school and were required by law to be in high school for 8 hours a day and through K through 12 for basically their entire life, and then they come to university and they're in 15 credit hours and they're trying to get a degree and they're doing everything. It's fair then that they have played against someone that has been a pro and played probably 3,000 hours in the last year and a half. under professional coaching and on stages and have all of that experience. That's fair because that's equivalent to me. I don't know what you think about that, but that's equivalent to me. That experience and going through that and getting that coaching and all of that time you have on the game and all of that experience you have playing with other pros in a team setting, that's equivalent to being 7 foot.
Yeah. I think obviously, I mean, it's not even the growth thing all the time, right? Because there's people of all different shapes and sizes. Maybe not
Sure.
all different shapes and sizes in sports, right? But like there's a decent variety there. And obviously no one's saying they should go back to play against high school, but once you go between college and professional, there's I think a little bit more of a okay, these could feasibly be from the same group. But even
I just don't think
still,
they
there's
are.
the experience part. I think the
Yeah.
experience part's probably the more important part, frankly.
Yes.
Because you're learning how to play in a team, you're learning how to work with other talented people, and you've gotten that much better at your sport because you've been pushing it for so long,
Yeah.
right?
And there's I'll get into the nitty-gritty for half a second, which is there's something called APMs, actions per minute. It's very big in StarCraft 2, right?
Yeah.
Where they have like a literal mod on the bottom of StarCraft 2 that literally says how many actions. It's just how many buttons you press on a keyboard and your mouse per minute. And good StarCraft players can get upwards of 400 plus, consistent stuff like that. Well, you may know this. What is the main difference between a top 500, a professional player in their esport, and the normal collegiate player, which let's just call them a masters player or a diamond player, somewhere in that range? So not the top 20 teams that consist of some ex pros at this point in almost every title, but say
Yeah.
let's take the average of the top 100 teams. Okay, that's probably Masters Diamond. That's probably his top 7% player, which is for most
Right.
titles is Master Diamond level. Or if you want to
Mhm.
take Valorant, like Ascendant Diamond level, something along those lines, right? Okay. Take that player. Take that player's APM versus a player that has been playing pro APM for years. That's not fair.
Right.
It's not even remotely fair. Okay? That the speed of the game is so different. It's so much faster in pro. And it's not just speed, it's not just quantity, it's quality. Pros will often double or triple the APMs of their peers in the collegiate space and have a higher quality of decision making at the same time. You're going to tell me that's fair? And sure, yeah, okay, they got to pro because they're better players and they were better anyway. Sure. But do their APMs and their decision making get better when they get professional coaching, are on a contract, or under pressure, have other teammates that push them to go faster, and other opponents especially that push them to go faster? Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's not
So
fair.
to turn this back, obviously, one of the main points of this, right, is the fact that in collegiate esports, there are often players that will go from high school and even drop out of high school to
Hmm.
go pro in esports. And then they have to come back around to either finish up their high school, get their GED, whatever, and then think about going to college.
Sure.
So you're suggesting that even that player wouldn't be allowed to play because they were pushed in the professional scene to get significantly better than the average college student that would be entering into their like more nominal degree path.
They
And
they
so,
got experiences that were not available to anyone else in their peer what would be their peer
yeah,
group.
sure.
Okay.
So what? They're still not allowed to play, but we're not able to give them an opportunity because
Why
they
is
went pro
playing the
first.
only opportunity?
That is like obviously that's where my brain went to, right? But feel
Why?
free to continue.
Why is playing the only opportunity? You have someone in your building that was a professional player, has been paid to play this game, and is a very high level competitor and in a specific video game. And a lot of times, a lot of those skills conflate. I mean, you can go to Shroud or a lot of other really, really famous esports people. If you're good at one FPS, you're good at most of them.
Right.
Okay. You might not be pro at most of them, but you're good at most of them. All right. So why is the opportunity? Why is that the only opportunity you're offering in your esports program? Um, So the esports industry is not just players, coaches, analysts, casters, producers, cameramen, businessmen, um, news and journalism, social media managers. That's 8 off the top of my head.
Right. All of
Okay.
whom, by the way, are building up some kind of experience that they don't already have
Yes.
because
And
they're
so
coming into the program, and we all know this, right? Former professional players go into coaching roles and they don't do the best job because they weren't trained to coach. But in a collegiate space, maybe you're able to train them a little bit better.
yes. And so what do you the question is really the put that's the immediate pushback everyone has on that opinion when I bring it up, which is, oh, we're just not going to give students an opportunity. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. Be a student. I welcome you to go to a college of your choice and get the training of your choice that you want and need. Okay. Are they being trained to do anything different if they were a pro and then they play for one of your rosters? Are you developing that student? Are you helping that student in their further career path? Are you doing anything that actually helps that student, or are you just using them for their skills to further your program? I only think there's one answer to that question. Okay. If you have, if the student comes and they are trying to get a business degree, great. Teach them business within the esports industry within they already have. Use them within your department, but use them in a way that also gives them experience and training in the career they're going to have the next 50 years, not what you can use them for in the next 4. That's doing a complete disservice to your students, and it's a bad look for your program. And I'm not bringing down programs that have pro players on their team or anything else like that, because some of these programs that have pro players on their teams are doing this. The pro players, yeah, they're playing, but they're also casting. They're also helping the program in philanthropy work or
Right.
fundraising or anything else like that. I'm not at all calling anybody out, but in my mind, don't use your students unless it's mutually beneficial, and in reality, unless it is a leaning towards they're getting more out of it than you are. Because we're in public education, and maybe you're a private institution, but you're in education nonetheless. Your job is to help students. That's your job. Okay. Don't use the pros. And that's where my stance comes from of
Well,
amateurism. Has
do
to be an
use them,
amateur.
just also help them along the
Yes.
way.
Yes. Thank you. Yes, absolutely. And so I have a very harsh stance on amateurism, and it absolutely comes from seeing my players that are all STEM majors from engineering colleges and stuff come back to their computers after 8, 9 hours of studying and going to class and having to go against, at the time, pros, active pros that I wasn't convinced were actually students of that university. I'm not convinced they're going to class. I'm not convinced that they're showing up. And not the least of which is because I saw them stream for the last 8 hours on Twitch that day, and then join and start doing it. You streamed from your home computer for 8 hours, and you do that 3 days a week, and you're going to tell me you're a full-time student? I don't believe you,
Yeah.
and
Right.
I don't think I have a good reason to believe you. And so amateurism was another one that came up with this that almost everyone agreed on. Amateurism is something that needs to be addressed, but almost no one agreed on how to address. And I think that's where the landscape study was everyone agreed on kind of what to address and sometimes agreed on how. But this was really the landscape study in and of itself, going back to the analogy in the beginning. We set the stage and we said that we need to take a first step. That's what this paper was.
Right.
Now we need to actually talk about, okay, we all agree we need to take one, so let's agree on what that step is. And we can be wrong, but if we're wrong, let's do that together and then pivot.
Build at least
Let's
a little bit of momentum along the way, right?
yes.
I guess so that's the next thing, right? Is how do we've talked a lot about, okay, we've thrown ideas at the dartboard being like, all right, all of this sounds all well and good, and people are going to
Yep.
have differing opinions from you, right? There's no saying that
Of course.
it has to be the case that your opinions are right?
No, and
But
I would push back, even personally, I would push
right.
back against any plan that is completely based on my opinions.
Yeah, right.
It's
I mean,
probably wrong.
any sane person should, right?
Yeah.
So that's all well and good, but now we have to think about how to do this. How are we going to bring some kind of order to the Wild West that is collegiate esports?
I think it's a multivariable equation. I don't think this is a one variable equation. I think certainly we need more peer-reviewed research. We need more research. We need more unbiased. We're doing surveys. We're doing for sure research that says, hey, it doesn't even have to say this is the right thing to do. If we can just get some research that says, hey, this doesn't work, or this is the wrong thing to do, great. We've eliminated 1 degree of the 360-degree path that we're currently on. That's fantastic. Do that another 358 times, please. Okay. So that's got to be one of the variables in this equation. Another one has to be, frankly, we have to start respecting that the different size colleges in private versus public, both of those distinctions were different. And I'm not saying we shouldn't talk to each other, but talk to your peers before you talk to across peer groups. Agree internally across a peer group before you start trying to push your message outward. And that kind of brings in the main variable, which is this is not a one-size-fits-all. Do not think that you have the magic key. There isn't a magic key, okay? I'm not going... I've advised multiple other colleges on how to start their programs, okay? Depending on what that college is, I never just gave them the 500-page document of OU Esports and say, here,
Right.
copy it. I've never once done that. Because we've advised, Mike and I both, have advised colleges much larger than OU and much smaller than OU. And we would do a complete disservice if we did that. So why are we talking about it like this? Let us recognize our differences as strengths, because Maryville is a strength of this space. OU is a strength of this space. We are completely different.
Yeah.
Okay? So let's recognize that and not try to get egotistical about the way we've built our program and say this is the right way. There is not a right way. Let's talk about some universalities that work. Great. All for it. But then let's talk about some ways that we can differentiate.
I'll tell you what the right way is. The right way is whatever way is supporting students.
Yeah.
That's the right way at the end of the day.
And we agree on that.
And
you and
I
I
think,
and 71 other directors.
I hope everyone can agree on that. And I hope that, to your point, that looks different from institution to institution. What student success looks like to you is not going to be what it looks like to me, what it looks like to Dan at Maryville, what it looks like to Doc at Boise, what it looks like to anybody in this ecosystem.
Boise is another great example. I should have mentioned them instead of us, but you get the point.
So, all right, we have been going on for quite some time now.
Yep.
Do you have any other summary remarks here? Wrap this all up in a nice, neat little bow that we can tie together and call it a day. That nice, neat little bow. I'll
try to survive. I'll try to get this out and survive it before your internet gives out here. So, because you were a little pixelated there, but we'll get there. So, a lot of this was opinions from me and opinions from us kind of going back and forth and talking about this, but we talked about a lot of things in the paper as far as what we asked 71 directors to talk about and what we actually went through. At the very end is, first of all, I want to say this paper is free. This is not a paid research journal or anything else like that. It is on the Voice website under resources. It is a free download. All we ask is that you put your institutional name and whether you're a student or faculty. That is it. Okay. Just because we want to know who's looking at it primarily. That's it. Okay. It's a free paper. Go read it. And if you're like, well, I don't want to read that. It's 24 pages. Fine. Don't read 24 pages. Let me scroll down here. Read 1, 2, 3, 4 pages. Read the last 4 pages. Read the recommendations and the future thoughts. Not because I want you to take the recommendations, but because the recommendations are over 10 key issues that need addressing and that need us to actually look at it and have these types of conversations, not just on, like you said, on Twitter, not just on Discord, not just even in these types of calls, but when you go to the NACE convention and the NEACE convention, and you go to LANs and you go anywhere to represent where it's multiple collegiate esports organizations in the same place, we need to have these conversations, because right now it doesn't feel like the conversations are even happening, which is the main issue here. We cannot take a first step if we cannot even talk.
It feels like we're so far in the weeds on what a reschedule policy should be, or
Yes.
what any one specific issue is, and not realizing that this could potentially be a larger problem and a larger solution to that problem.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, it's frustrating as hell. Sorry, but it's frustrating as hell when you schedule a match, you try to do production for it, you try to get more people involved, you do everything, and then they're an hour and 15 minutes late. Or they say, hey, can we reschedule 20 minutes before match time? Okay. I understand that. It's not it shouldn't be the focus. It's not such a big issue that we need to start creating divides within our industry, and certain people won't talk to other people because of the way that they discussed this issue. This is a minor issue. What's a major issue? How are you serving your students? What's a major issue? Is the competition fair? Okay? And I mean that in a multitude of ways. We talked about amateurism. Is it fair that OU plays University of Wisconsin at Green Bay? We have 30,000. You have 7,000. Maybe you
It
get
depends.
lucky.
Are your teams on scholarship? Are
No.
my teams on scholarship?
No.
Mine are not. Yours
I
are not.
assumed. Yeah, mine are
Even
not.
still,
But even still, I have
probably not.
30,000 to pull from. You have 7.
Yeah.
Is that fair? I don't know that that's fair. So it's a matter of like, okay, can we talk about what's important? Can we talk about fairness with the competition fairness? Can we talk about student advocacy? Can we talk about getting our students' names and brand recognition out there, meaning production resources? These are the important topics, not who's going to be the next head of NACE, or where is the next location of this tournament going to be, or reschedule policy. That's all well and good, but if the competition isn't fair, if our students don't feel like they're even being heard, what's the point? That's the bow. That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
That's not even the bow. That's the foundation. That's the rock at the bottom. Like digging through all this, that's the rock at the bottom. If we're not doing that, what's the point?
Yeah.
And we're not doing that. As my dog
We'll get
finally
better.
decides to bark.
We'll get better.
Yeah,
certainly.
we will get better. This will succeed. I have no doubt. I would not stake my career on it otherwise, which I have.
Yeah.
It will get better. I have no doubt. But it won't do it naturally. It will not do it on its own. We need to have these conversations.
So speaking of not doing it naturally, the final question we like to ask each of our guests is if you could snap your finger and change one thing about collegiate esports, what would it be?
I would put it in every director's brain that they need to get branding and licensing for their universities. And then they need to go to whatever overarching traditional sports conference they're a part of, whether it's the SEC, whether it's a Power 4 conference or not, I don't care. Sun Belt, Mountain West, don't care. And they need to get permission to get the licensing and name, image, likeness of the conference. And they need to see how much partnership and sponsoring with those resources available is worth, and start making their own leagues. That's what I would say. Because until we can put up on Twitch or YouTube, this is the University of Oklahoma with the interlocking O and U, and this is the University of Texas with the Longhorn. As long as it's University of Oklahoma with OU and Longhorn Gaming with no logo, no one's going to care. And so that's, if I could snap my fingers, I'd say everyone gets licensing and trademark rights to their universities, and everyone gets logo and licensing rights to their overarching conferences to use as they see fit to get sponsorships or run production.
Oh, how easy our lives would be if that were the case.
I know.
Yeah. Instead, you and I both know how that actually ends up working.
Yep.
At public institutions.
It's hard.
Josh, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
That was a fantastic conversation. I want to give the moment for the floor for yourself. Any shout outs, things you want to mention real quick, anything else there?
Just the paper on voice, which I already kind of talked about, and he's gonna hate that I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna thank Mike Aguilar. I'm gonna thank Moog for giving me the opportunity to work in this space long term for the rest of my career, basically, hopefully. And without him, I definitely just would not be here. I wouldn't have given the opportunity, or wouldn't have thought the opportunity was even real if it did come up. So I do want to thank him, at least.
Well, very humble, of course, as always. We have plenty of mentors, I'm sure, that we can always count on, and I'm sure Moog is a fantastic one. Well, Josh, thanks again so much for joining us. Fantastic conversation. We'll see you around. You just listened to Torchbearers by College Esports News. Before we go, we want to thank our sponsors one more time. Playfly College Esports just released their Spring 2025 Roadmap to Registration, which details several major changes coming to their competitions next year. Schools can submit their varsity applications for the upcoming Spring 2025 season and the 2025 through 2026 academic year now, and all competitions will open registration on December 10th. Details on the spring merch drop and Tournament of Champions at CECC May Madness will be available in the coming weeks. Scan the QR code on screen now or visit playflycollege.gg for more information. Also, real quick, Neuropa's flow state is redefining what energy and focus feel like. Flow state isn't just your typical energy fix and isn't pumping you full of just sugar and caffeine. Flow state combines ingredients like alpha GPC, new LVL, and huperzine A to boost focus, mental clarity, and even your memory and learning. It's also designed to keep you in the zone for longer with both instant and delayed release caffeine to give you real sustained energy that fuels both your body and mind. If you're looking for real mental clarity and performance that lasts, check out Neuropa's flow state. Your brain will thank you. Use code CEN to get 10% off your order at neuroptima.gg. Our sponsors of this episode had no editorial control over the content contained within. As always, I was your host, Kenneth Christina. Jared Vanderweel is our project manager. Ashton Lewis is our graphic designer. V. Tran is our editor. Sheridan Shea helped record this episode. And Derek Santiago is creative director of CEN. Be sure to follow CEN on X, TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram to stay up to date on all things college esports. And check out our website at collegeesportsnews.org. Thanks for listening, and keep carrying the flame.